The train lurched to a stop with a screech that set Evelyn's teeth on edge. Through the dust-caked window, Red Hollow looked exactly like what it was. The ass end of civilization clinging to the Wyoming frontier like a tick on a dying dog. Wooden buildings leaned against each other as if too exhausted to stand alone. The main street was a river of mud that had baked hard under the July sun, cracked and treacherous. Evelyn pressed her palm against the glass, leaving a print in the grime. Her reflection stared back. 23 years old, brown hair pulled into a bun that had surrendered to the journey somewhere around Nebraska, cheekbones too sharp from months of eating whatever she could afford. She looked like what she was, desperate. The other passengers pushed past, their shoulders knocking against hers without apology. A woman in a purple dress shot her a pitying look that made Evelyn's jaw tighten. She didn't need pity. She needed this to work. "Miss Hart," the conductor appeared beside her, his mustache twitching with poorly concealed judgment. "This is your stop." She gathered her carpet bag, everything she owned fit inside it now, and stepped onto the platform. The heat slammed into her like a fist. Back in Philadelphia, July meant shade trees and lemonade on the porch. Here it meant dust and desperation baked into the air itself. A man in a bowler hat stood at the edge of the platform, consulting a pocket watch. Warren Blackwood, her future husband. She'd memorized his letter, the neat handwriting promising security, a comfortable home, a fresh start for a woman of good character and practical disposition. He'd sent a photograph, a stern-faced man with sharp features and a merchant's calculating eyes. Evelyn smoothed her traveling dress and walked toward him, her boots hollow on the wooden planks. "Mr. Blackwood?" He looked up and she watched his expression shift from expectation to assessment to something colder. Dismissal. "Miss Hart." He didn't remove his hat, didn't offer his hand. "You're late." "The train. I received a telegram from Denver. You've been traveling for 5 days. His eyes moved over her with the same attention he'd give inventory. "The photograph you sent was evidently taken some time ago." Heat flooded her cheeks. The photograph had been from before her father died, before creditors seized their house, before she'd spent 3 months working in a boarding house basement for enough money to eat. "I apologize if I've changed, Mr. Blackwood, but I assure you, you're not what I expected." He snapped the watch closed. "I've reconsidered my situation." The platform seemed to tilt. "I'm sorry? I no longer require a wife." He said it the way someone might cancel a furniture order. "My circumstances have changed. I'm engaged to Miss Caroline Fletcher, the banker's daughter. I'm sure you understand." Understanding crashed over her like winter water. He'd found someone better, someone with money, with connections, with value beyond being another mouth to feed. The advertisement had been insurance, a backup plan, and she'd been the fool who showed up after he'd cashed in his real prize. "Mr. Blackwood," her voice came out steadier than she felt. "I've traveled 1,500 miles on your promise. I've spent everything I had on the train fare. That's unfortunate." He adjusted his collar. "But I cannot be held responsible for your poor planning. Good day, Miss Hart." He turned to leave. "Wait." The word came out harder than she intended. "You sent for me. You made a commitment. You can't just—" "I can do exactly as I please." He faced her again, and now his expression held irritation. "I suggest you purchase a return ticket to wherever you came from. The eastbound train departs Thursday." Thursday. 3 days away. She had 17 cents in her purse. A crowd had gathered. Of course it had. Entertainment was scarce in towns like this, and public humiliation was always good theater. Women in faded calico whispered behind their hands. Men leaned against storefronts, arms crossed, waiting to see what the desperate Eastern woman would do next. "I have no money for a ticket." She hated how small her voice sounded. "I used everything to come here." Blackwood's mouth tightened. "Then I suggest you find employment. Mrs. Crawford runs a boarding house that sometimes needs kitchen help, if you're willing to work." The way he said it, "if you're willing to work," made her want to throw her carpet bag at his smug face. Instead, she lifted her chin. "I see. Thank you for making your character so immediately clear, Mr. Blackwood. I consider myself fortunate to have discovered it before making a terrible mistake." Someone in the crowd laughed. Blackwood's face reddened. "Careful, Miss Hart. This is a small town. You'll find life here very difficult if you make enemies of influential men." I'll take my chances. He left, his boots angry on the platform stairs. The crowd began to disperse, their entertainment concluded. Evelyn stood alone, clutching her carpet bag, trying to breathe past the tightness in her chest. 1,500 miles. Every dollar she'd saved, every hope she'd let herself feel on those long train rides west. Gone. Discarded like trash on a platform in a town that already hated her for being unwanted. She wouldn't cry, not here, not in front of these people. Quite a show. The voice came from behind her, low and rough, like stones grinding together. Evelyn turned. The man leaning against the platform post looked like he'd been carved from the same rough country that surrounded them. Tall enough that she had to tilt her head back. Shoulders that strained his worn shirt. Face weathered by sun and wind with a scar cutting through his left eyebrow and down his cheek. Dark hair needed cutting. Eyes were slate gray and hard as winter. I'm glad someone enjoyed it, Evelyn said, her voice brittle. Didn't say I enjoyed it. He pushed off the post and she resisted the urge to step back. Something about him demanded space, radiated a kind of coiled tension that made her survival instincts wake up. Said it was quite a show, Blackwood's an ass. Apparently, she adjusted her grip on the carpet bag. If you'll excuse me, I need to find this boarding house. Mrs. Crawford won't hire you. Evelyn stopped. I'm sorry? The boarding house. She won't hire you. He said it matter of fact, without cruelty. She's Blackwood's cousin. She won't go against him. The last bit of hope in Evelyn's chest crumbled. I see. You got any skills? She looked at him sharply. I beg your pardon? Skills. Can you cook? Sew? Keep books? His eyes moved over her, but not the way Blackwood's had. This was assessment of a different kind. Practical. Measuring. Can you manage a household? I ran my father's house for 8 years after my mother died. The words came out defensive. I can cook for a dozen people, manage accounts, treat common injuries and illnesses, organize inventory, and negotiate with suppliers who think women are too stupid to know the price of flour. Is there a reason you're interrogating me? Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. Need a housekeeper. Mine quit last week. Walked off the property in the middle of the night. Didn't even collect her wages. How encouraging. It's honest work, room, board, and $30 a month. You'd manage the house, cook for the hands when they're in, keep supplies organized. It's a working ranch, so it's not easy. But it's a job. $30 a month. It was more than she'd made in Philadelphia. Enough to save for a ticket somewhere better. Somewhere she could start over without the stain of being publicly rejected. Where is this ranch? North, up in the mountains, Mercer Ridge. A woman walking past jerked to a stop. You're Colt Mercer? He didn't look at her. That's right. The woman grabbed her daughter's hand and hurried away, throwing a look back at Evelyn that mixed pity and warning. Other people were watching now, their expressions shifting. I take it you have a reputation, Mr. Mercer? I do. He didn't elaborate. And what kind of reputation would that be? The kind that keeps people at a distance. His eyes met hers, and something in them dared her to push further. I'm offering you a job, that's all. You want it or not? Every instinct screamed that this was a mistake. A man with a reputation, an isolated ranch, a housekeeper who'd fled in the night. It read like the beginning of a cautionary tale mothers told their daughters. But Evelyn looked down the main street of Red Hollow, at the faces that had enjoyed watching her humiliation, at Warren Blackwood's retreating back, at the boarding house that wouldn't hire her. She thought about 17 cents and a Thursday train she couldn't afford and the long journey back to Philadelphia where creditors and worse memories waited. Sometimes the devil you didn't know was better than the hell you'd already lived through. I want it, she said. Colt nodded once. Wagons down the street. Get your things. This is my things. She lifted the carpet bag. He looked at it, then at her. That's all? That's all? Something shifted in his expression, not pity exactly, but recognition, like he understood what it meant to have everything you owned fit in a single bag. Come on, then. She followed him down the platform stairs and into Red Hollow's excuse for a main street. The townspeople watched them pass with expressions ranging from curiosity to concern. An old man sitting outside the general store shook his head slowly. A woman whispered something to her companion that made them both look at Evelyn with unmistakable sympathy. What the hell had she just agreed to? Colt's wagon sat in front of the saloon, a sturdy vehicle that had seen hard use but was well maintained. Two horses stood in harness, their coats gleaming despite the dust. Whatever else Colt Mercer was, he took care of his animals. He took her carpet bag and tossed it in the wagon bed with more care than Blackwood had shown her entire existence. Then he offered his hand to help her up. His palm was calloused, his grip solid. For a moment, Evelyn felt steadier than she had since leaving Philadelphia. She climbed onto the wagon seat, arranging her skirts. Colt swung up beside her with easy strength and gathered the reins. The horses started forward without prompting, like they knew the route by heart. Red Hollow fell away behind them. The road, if you could call it that, climbed into rolling hills that gave way to mountains. The kind of landscape that didn't care if you lived or died, that would swallow you whole and never notice. They rode in silence for 20 minutes before Evelyn couldn't stand it anymore. You said your last housekeeper left suddenly. That's right. May I ask why? She didn't say. Mr. Mercer, Colt. I'm sorry? Call me Colt. Mr. Mercer was my father, and he's dead. The bluntness of it startled her. Colt, then. I need to know what I'm walking into. If there's danger, There's always danger. This is Wyoming territory. We've got storms that'll tear buildings apart, winter that'll kill you if you're stupid, and occasionally someone decides they want what's mine and tries to take it. He glanced at her. But I don't hit women, if that's what you're asking. And I don't force myself on employees. You'll have your own room with a lock on the door. It should have been reassuring. Instead, it just confirmed that she'd needed to ask. Why did she really leave? His jaw tightened. Don't know. Woke up one morning. She was gone. Took some food and a horse. I tracked her as far as the main road, then let her go. And you have no idea why? If I did, I'd have fixed it. There was something in his voice. Frustration, maybe, or the weariness of someone tired of being misunderstood. Evelyn studied his profile. The scar on his face looked old, a long-healed wound that pulled the corner of his eye slightly. He had the build of a man who worked with his hands, the wariness of someone who expected trouble. The people in town seem afraid of you, she said. They are. Why? Because I give them reason to be. It wasn't the answer she expected. Most men would deny it or make excuses. Colt just stated it like fact. That's not reassuring, you know. Didn't mean it to be. He was quiet for a moment, then added, I don't suffer fools or thieves. I don't play politics or kiss ass to get what I need. That makes people nervous, makes them think I'm dangerous. Are you? He looked at her then, really looked at her, and Evelyn felt the weight of that stare. Yeah, I am, but not to people who are straight with me. You do your job, stay honest, don't create problems. We'll get along fine. The wagon climbed higher. The air cooled, carried the scent of pine and distance. Below them, Red Hollow shrank to nothing. Ahead, mountains rose like walls holding back the sky. How long have you had the ranch? Evelyn asked. 15 years. Built it from nothing. Family? No. The finality in his voice killed that line of questioning. Evelyn fell silent, watching the landscape change. They passed through a valley where a creek cut through rock, climbed a ridge where wind bent the grass flat, descended into a canyon where shadows pooled like ink. The sun had moved considerably when Colt finally said, There. Evelyn followed his gesture and felt her breath catch. Mercer Ridge spread across a high valley like a kingdom. Grassland rolled away in waves, sectioned by post and rail fences. Cattle grazed in scattered groups, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Buildings clustered at the valley's heart, a large barn, several smaller structures, corrals, and at the center, a house. It was bigger than she'd expected, 2 stories of wood and stone that looked like it had grown from the land itself. Solid, permanent, nothing like the leaning structures of Red Hollow. It's beautiful, she said, and meant it. Colt said nothing, but something in his shoulders eased slightly. They rolled down into the valley. Cowboys working near the barn looked up, their faces registering surprise. A man repairing a fence straightened, hammer frozen mid-swing. News would spread fast. Colt Mercer had returned from town with a woman. The wagon stopped in front of the house. Colt climbed down and offered his hand again. Evelyn took it, stepping onto solid ground that felt strange after hours of swaying motion. Up close, the house showed its age, paint fading, porch boards weathered, windows that needed washing. But the bones were good, strong. "Kitchen's inside, left side," Colt said, retrieving her carpet bag. "Bedroom's upstairs. Take the one at the end of the hall. It's got the best window. Pantry's stocked, but it's a mess. Previous keeper wasn't organized." He handed her the bag, and for a moment they stood there, this stranger who'd offered her a lifeline, and this desperate woman who'd taken it. "Thank you," Evelyn said. "For this, I won't waste the opportunity." Colt studied her face like he was trying to solve a problem. "Wasn't charity, I need a housekeeper, you need a job. That's all this is." "Even so," he nodded once, already turning away. "Get settled. I'll send someone up with fresh water. Dinner's at 6. Nothing fancy, just feed whoever's around." Then he was walking toward the barn, his stride long and purposeful, leaving Evelyn alone in front of a house in the middle of nowhere with a job she'd taken from a man she didn't know and probably shouldn't trust. She climbed the porch steps and pushed open the door. The interior was dim, cooler than outside. A large central room with a stone fireplace, worn furniture, shelves lined with books. To the left, she found the kitchen, spacious, with a cast-iron stove, a long work table, cabinets that had seen better days. A door at the back opened onto a pantry. Colt hadn't lied. It was a mess. Sacks of flour and sugar stacked haphazardly, jars of preserves with no labels, dried goods scattered across shelves with no apparent organization. But it was workable. More than workable. It was a project, and Evelyn had always been good with projects. She set her carpetbag down and rolled up her sleeves. By the time the sun touched the western mountains, she'd transformed the pantry. Everything had a place now, labeled and arranged by type and frequency of use. She'd found a ladder in the barn and washed the high windows, letting in light that revealed the kitchen's good bones. Solid counters, plenty of storage, a stove that just needed proper care. Voices outside announced the arrival of the ranch hands. Evelyn tied on an apron she'd found hanging on a nail and surveyed what she had to work with. The pantry yielded potatoes, onions, dried beef, canned tomatoes, and a jar of what she hoped was chili powder. Not much, but enough. She got to work. The men came in hesitantly, like they weren't sure what to expect. 6 of them, all weathered and wary, taking seats at the long table in the dining room. They nodded to her, touched their hat brims, said nothing. Colt entered last, his presence filling the doorway. He'd washed up, she noticed. Changed his shirt. The scar on his face caught the lamplight. Evelyn served the stew she'd made. Nothing fancy, just beef and vegetables in a thick broth, with bread she'd found and managed to salvage. The men ate in silence, but she watched their bowls empty, saw them exchange glances. One of them, a grizzled man with a gray beard, finally spoke. "This is damn good, miss." "Thank you," Evelyn said. "Better than Mercer's cooking, that's for certain." This from a younger man with a crooked smile. "That's not saying much," another added. "Man burns water." Quiet laughter rippled around the table. Evelyn glanced at Colt, expecting anger. Instead, she caught what might have been amusement in his eyes. "I don't pay you to critique my cooking, Hayes." "No, sir. You pay us to keep your cattle alive and your fences standing. Critiquing's just a bonus." More laughter. The tension in the room eased. These men liked each other, Evelyn realized. Underneath the rough exterior, there was loyalty here. After dinner, she cleared the plates and washed up while the hands drifted back to the bunkhouse. Colt remained sitting at the table with a cup of coffee, watching her work. "You settling in all right?" he asked. "The pantry's organized. I'll tackle the rest tomorrow." The men liked dinner. It was just stew. It was better than just stew. He was quiet for a moment. "Thank you." Evelyn turned from the sink, surprised. "For cooking? For not running?" He met her eyes. "A lot of people would have. After today. After everything." She thought about Warren Blackwood, about the crowd on that platform, about how close she'd come to having nowhere at all. "I didn't have anywhere to run to." Even so, they looked at each other across the kitchen. 2 people who'd made a bargain born of desperation and convenience. Outside, darkness had swallowed the valley. Inside, the lamplight made the space feel smaller, more intimate than it should. "I should check my room," Evelyn said, breaking the moment. "Right. Colt stood, draining his coffee. Anything you need, let me know. I'll be up early, leave before dawn, but Hayes will be around if you need something. Thank you. He nodded and left, his boots heavy on the floor. Evelyn finished the dishes, banked the fire in the stove, and climbed the stairs to the second floor. The bedroom at the end of the hall was simple. A bed with a quilt, a dresser, a chair by the window. Her carpetbag sat on the bed where someone, Colt, probably, had left it. The window overlooked the valley, and even in darkness, she could see stars scattered like thrown diamonds across the sky. Evelyn sank onto the bed, suddenly exhausted. Her body ached from the journey, from the shock of the day, from the constant tension of not knowing what came next. But she was here. She had a job, a room, a place to sleep. It wasn't what she'd imagined when she'd left Philadelphia. It wasn't the security Warren Blackwood had promised. But it was hers. She unpacked her carpetbag. 2 dresses, a nightgown, a hairbrush. Her mother's pearl earrings wrapped in cloth, and at the bottom, a photograph. Her father, standing in front of their Philadelphia house, his hand on her shoulder, both of them smiling at something the photographer had said. Before everything fell apart, Evelyn set the photograph on the dresser where she could see it, then changed into her nightgown and climbed into bed. The mattress was softer than she expected. The quilt smelled like sage and clean air. Through the window she could hear the distant sound of cattle, the murmur of men's voices from the bunkhouse, the vast silence of the Wyoming night. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. She'd have to figure out how to manage this house, how to navigate the dynamics between Colt and his men, how to survive in a place that was beautiful and brutal in equal measure. But tonight, for the first time in months, Evelyn felt something that might have been hope. She closed her eyes and let sleep take her. Gig. Dawn came early at Mercer Ridge. Evelyn woke to pale light and the sound of horses, voices carrying through the window. She dressed quickly in her other dress, the practical one, dark fabric that wouldn't show dirt, and braided her hair. Downstairs, the kitchen was cold. She got the stove going, started coffee, and began breakfast. By the time the men came in, she had eggs, bacon, and fresh biscuits waiting. Colt appeared last, looking like he hadn't slept much. He took his coffee black, ate quickly, and was gone before she'd finished serving the others. Hayes, the older hand who'd complimented her stew, lingered after the others left. "Don't mind the boss," he said. "He's not much for conversation before noon." I noticed. "He's a good man, though, hard but fair, takes care of his people." Hayes studied her with shrewd eyes. "What made you come out here, if you don't mind me asking?" "I answered a marriage advertisement," Evelyn said, seeing no point in lying. The gentleman in question changed his mind. Warren Blackwood. Hayes spat the name like it tasted bad. "Figures. He's been courting the banker's daughter for months, probably kept that advertisement running as insurance." "That seems to be the consensus." "And Colt offered you a job." "He did." Hayes nodded slowly. "That sounds like him. He doesn't abide seeing people get kicked when they're down." He paused. "But you should know, this place isn't easy. We're isolated up here. Winter comes hard and stays long, and Colt's got enemies." "What kind of enemies?" "The kind that think a man who built something from nothing doesn't deserve to keep it." Hayes set down his empty cup. "Just keep your head down, do your work, and don't get involved in ranch politics. You'll be fine." He left, and Evelyn spent the morning cleaning. The house had good bones, but had clearly been neglected. She washed windows, swept floors, beat dust from curtains. In the afternoon, she tackled Colt's office, a room off the main living area filled with papers, maps, and books on cattle ranching. She was organizing receipts when she found it, a letter dated 3 months earlier with a Denver postmark. The handwriting was elegant, feminine. "Colt, I've thought about your proposal. I'm sorry, but I can't marry a man who lives so far from civilization. You deserve someone who can be happy in that wilderness, but I need more than isolation and cattle. I hope you understand." Margaret Evelyn set the letter down, her chest tight with unexpected sympathy. So Colt had tried for marriage too, had been rejected too. Maybe that's why he'd stepped forward on that platform. He recognized the sting of being unwanted. "Find something interesting?" She spun around. Colt stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "I was organizing your papers." "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to pry." But you did. He crossed the room and took the letter, glancing at it before tossing it in the fire. Ancient history. I'm sorry, Evelyn said again, meaning it. For what? Reading someone else's mail, or for the fact that I got rejected? Both, I suppose. Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. At least you're honest. He gestured at the office. This looks better. You're fast. I don't like leaving work half done. Good trait to have. He was quiet for a moment, then said, I need to ride out to check the north fence line. Be gone most of the day. Hayes will be around if you need anything. I'll manage. He nodded and left. Through the window, Evelyn watched him mount his horse, a big bay that danced sideways before settling, and ride out with 2 other men. The house felt larger without him in it, emptier. She spent the afternoon baking bread and planning next week's meals based on what she'd found in the pantry. The men came back at dinner, ate the roast she'd made, and disappeared again into the gathering darkness. Colt returned late, after the others had gone to bed. Evelyn was in the kitchen, finishing the last of the dishes, when she heard his horse. He came in through the back door, moving quietly, and stopped short when he saw her. Thought you'd be asleep, he said. Couldn't settle. She dried her hands on a towel. There's stew left if you're hungry. I could eat. She dished out a bowl and set it in front of him with fresh bread. He ate like a man who'd forgotten food existed, and she realized he probably hadn't eaten since morning. Long day? She asked. Found a section of fence down. Took longer to fix than expected. He paused between bites. You settling in all right? I am, thank you. The men giving you any trouble? No, they've been respectful. Good. They won't. They know better. But if anyone steps out of line, you tell me. There was steel in his voice. Evelyn believed him. They sat in companionable silence while he finished eating. When he was done, he carried his bowl to the sink and washed it himself, which surprised her. You don't have to do that, she said. Not helpless. He dried the bowl and set it on the shelf with the others. I appreciate the food and everything else you've done. House looks better than it has in years. It's my job. Even so. He turned to face her, and in the lamplight, his features softened slightly. I know today was shit for you, yesterday too, but you're doing good work here. Wanted you to know that. Something warm unfurled in Evelyn's chest. Thank you. He nodded once and headed for the stairs, then paused. Lock your door at night, not because I don't trust my men. I do. But it's good practice out here. Never know when trouble might ride in. Then he was gone, his boots heavy on the stairs, leaving Evelyn alone in the kitchen with her thoughts and the dying fire. She climbed to her room, locked the door as instructed, and lay in bed listening to the night. Somewhere in the darkness, a coyote howled. The wind moved through the eaves. The house settled and creaked. And Evelyn realized that for the first time since her father died, she felt almost safe. The retaliation came faster than Evelyn expected. 3 days after Fletcher's visit, Hayes rode back from town with news that made Colt's face go dark. Blackwood's spreading stories. Says you've got Miss Hart living here under false pretenses. Says she's not really a housekeeper. Evelyn felt her stomach drop. What exactly is he saying? Hayes looked uncomfortable. That that the arrangement here isn't proper. That Colt took advantage of your situation. That son of a bitch. Colt's voice was quiet, which made it more dangerous. He rejects her in public. And now he's destroying her reputation because I wouldn't kiss Fletcher's ass? It's worse than that, boss. The general store won't extend us credit anymore. Says our account needs to be settled before they'll sell us anything else. We don't owe them a damn thing. I know, but Fletcher sits on the bank board, and the bank owns half the store. They're squeezing us. Evelyn watched Colt's jaw work, watched him process the political reality of what was happening. This wasn't about her reputation or even about business. It was about power. Fletcher and Blackwood were teaching Colt what happened when you refused to play their game. How much do we need from the store? Colt asked finally. Depends. We're low on coffee, sugar, flour, some other staples. But if we can't get supplies in town, we'll have to ride to Cheyenne. That's 3 days there and back. Then we ride to Cheyenne. Colt's tone left no room for argument. I'm not begging Fletcher for permission to buy flour. Hayes nodded and left. Colt stood there, fury radiating off him like heat. I'm sorry, Evelyn said quietly. This is my fault. The hell it is. He turned to face her. You didn't do anything wrong. Blackwood's the one who broke his promise. Fletcher's the one who tried to shake me down. They're using you to get at me, and that makes me want to burn their whole operation to the ground. The venom in his voice should have frightened her. Instead, Evelyn felt something warm and fierce settle in her chest. When was the last time someone had defended her like this? When had anyone ever cared enough to be angry on her behalf? What are you going to do? She asked. Right now? I'm going to Cheyenne to buy supplies. Long term? His smile was sharp and humorless. I'm going to make sure Fletcher and Blackwood regret starting this fight. He left before dawn the next morning, taking Hayes and 2 others. That left 4 men at the ranch, plus Evelyn. She tried not to think about what Fletcher had said, about the rustlers having twice as many men, tried not to count the rifles and wonder if 4 would be enough. The first day passed quietly. Evelyn threw herself into work, baking bread and organizing the root cellar and mending shirts that had been piling up. The men came and went, checking fences and moving cattle, their faces carefully neutral when they looked at her. They'd heard the rumors. Of course they had. In a place like Red Hollow, gossip traveled faster than telegrams. On the second day, Jack Morrison lingered after breakfast, his young face troubled. Miss Hart, can I ask you something? Of course. Those things people are saying in town, they're not true, are they? Evelyn set down the plate she'd been washing. What exactly did you hear? That you and the boss, that you're... He couldn't finish, his ears turning red. That I'm his mistress? Evelyn said bluntly. That he's keeping me here for reasons that have nothing to do with housekeeping? Jack nodded miserably. It's not true. She met his eyes, letting him see the truth in hers. Mr. Mercer offered me honest work when I needed it. That's all this is. Anyone saying different is lying. I knew it. Relief flooded his face. I told Charlie it was bullshit. Sorry, excuse my language. But he said where there's smoke, there's fire, and I said that's only true if someone's deliberately setting fires to make smoke. Despite everything, Evelyn smiled. That's an astute observation, Jack. My ma raised me to judge people by their actions, not by gossip. And I've seen how you work here, how you take care of things, how you took care of Tom when he got hurt. He shifted his weight. Just wanted you to know, I don't believe what they're saying, and I'll knock down anyone who repeats it in front of me. Something tight loosened in Evelyn's chest. Thank you. That means more than you know. After he left, she stood in the kitchen fighting back tears. One person believing her shouldn't matter this much. But it did. It mattered desperately. That afternoon, she was hanging laundry when she heard horses. Multiple horses moving fast. Her heart jumped into her throat. She dropped the wet shirt she'd been holding and ran toward the bunkhouse. Riders coming, she called. The men emerged, rifles already in hand. Charlie, the oldest hand after Hayes, squinted toward the approaching dust cloud. How many? I couldn't tell. At least 4, maybe more. Get inside, lock the doors. I'm not hiding while inside. Now. Charlie's voice left no room for argument. Boss would skin us alive if anything happened to you. Evelyn ran to the house, her mind racing. Where was Colt? Still a day away at least. Would these riders wait that long? Inside, she locked the doors and grabbed the rifle Colt kept above the fireplace. Her hand shook as she checked it was loaded. She'd never fired a gun in her life, but she'd be damned if she went down without trying. Through the window, she watched the riders approach. 5 of them, rough-looking men on rough-looking horses. They stopped 50 yards from the house, and the lead rider dismounted. Charlie and the others stood in a line between the riders and the house, rifles ready. Jack was there too, his young face set with determination. We're looking for Colt Mercer, the lead rider called. He was tall and lean, with a scar that split his upper lip. He around? He's not, Charlie said. State your business and move on. Our business is with Mercer, not his hired help. Then come back when he's here. The rider smiled, and it wasn't friendly. See, that's a problem. We've got something that belongs to him, and we'd like to discuss terms for its return. What do you have? About 30 head of cattle, good breeding stock. Be a shame if something happened to them. Evelyn's breath caught. These were the rustlers. They were here, at the ranch, making threats while Colt was gone. Charlie's voice stayed level. You're admitting to theft? I'm admitting to being in possession of property we found wandering on open range. Could be they belong to Mercer. Could be they don't. Hard to say without proper documentation. They're branded. Brands can be changed. The threat hung in the air, heavy and unmistakable. Charlie shifted his weight, and Evelyn could see him calculating odds. 4 men against 5. No, 3 against 5. Jack was barely more than a boy. How much you want? Charlie asked finally. Now we're talking business. The writer's smile widened. $500, cash. We'll even throw in information about where to find the rest of his missing stock. The boss won't pay. Then I guess those cattle are ours, and maybe next time we find some wandering stock, we won't bother offering to return it at all. Charlie was quiet for a long moment. I'll pass along your message. Where can Mercer find you? He can't. We'll find him. 3 days. If we don't hear from him by then, the offer expires. The rider swung back onto his horse. Oh, and tell him we met his pretty housekeeper in town. Quite a scandal, keeping a woman out here all alone. People are talking. Rage flooded through Evelyn, hot and sharp. Before she could think better of it, she threw open the door and stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand. I'm right here, she called. You want to discuss scandal? Discuss it with me. Every head turned. Charlie swore under his breath. The lead writer's eyes locked onto her, and his smile turned predatory. Well now, the lady herself. He tipped his hat mockingly. Pleasure to make your acquaintance, Miss Hart. I'm sure. Evelyn kept the rifle pointed at the ground, but her finger was on the trigger. You've delivered your message. Now get off this property. Awful brave standing there with that gun. You even know how to use it? I guess you'll find out if you don't leave. The writer laughed, but there was something ugly underneath it. Got yourself a firecracker, Mercer does. Hope he appreciates what he's got. 3 days, Charlie said firmly. Now go. The riders turned their horses and left, but not quickly. They took their time, making it clear they weren't afraid, making it clear they could come back whenever they wanted. When they were finally gone, Charlie rounded on Evelyn. What the hell were you thinking? I was thinking I'm tired of men using me as a weapon against Colt. You could have gotten yourself killed. They weren't going to shoot me on his property. That would have brought the law down on them, and they know it. She lowered the rifle, suddenly exhausted. They were just testing us, seeing how far they could push. Charlie stared at her like she'd grown a second head. Where'd you learn about intimidation tactics? My father ran a business in Philadelphia. I watched suppliers try to squeeze him for years. She climbed down from the porch. What are we going to do? Wait for the boss to get back. Let him decide. And if they come back before then? Charlie's face was grim. Then we do what we can and hope it's enough. That night, Evelyn barely slept. She kept seeing that rider's smile, kept hearing the threat underneath his words, kept thinking about 30 head of cattle and how much $500 represented to a ranch like this. She also kept thinking about Colt riding back into an ambush, kept imagining him facing down 5 armed men with only Hayes and 2 others. When dawn finally came, she gave up on sleep and went downstairs. Charlie was already in the kitchen, coffee brewing. Morning, he said. Morning. She poured herself a cup. Did you sleep? Some. You? Not really. They sat in companionable silence until Charlie said, What you did yesterday, coming out on that porch, that took guts. Or stupidity. Maybe both. He studied her over his coffee. But it showed those bastards were not rolling over. That counts for something. I hope so. The boss is lucky to have you, Charlie said. Don't care what anyone in town says. You've been good for this place. Good for him. Evelyn felt her throat tighten. Thank you. Just telling the truth. He drained his cup and stood. I'm going to ride the perimeter. Keep an eye out. Jack will stay close to the house today. After he left, Evelyn threw herself into work. She couldn't control what was coming, but she could control this. The bread rising in the oven, the floors swept clean, the order she imposed on chaos. Colt returned that evening, the wagon loaded with supplies. Evelyn heard the horses and ran outside, relief flooding through her so strongly it made her dizzy. He climbed down from the wagon, and his eyes found hers immediately. You all right? I'm fine, but we need to talk. Yeah, Hayes told me. Rustlers were here. His jaw was tight. They threaten you? Not directly, but What? She told him everything, the riders, the cattle, the demand for money. Told him about stepping onto the porch with the rifle, watched his face go from angry to furious to something darker. You confronted armed rustlers, he said slowly. With a rifle you don't know how to use. I wasn't going to hide while they threatened your property. My property. His voice rose. Evelyn, they could have killed you. They could have... He stopped, visibly fighting for control. Do you understand what could have happened? I understand perfectly. But I also understand that someone needed to show them we weren't afraid. That this ranch isn't going to roll over just because you're not here. That's not your job. Maybe not, but it needed doing. They stared at each other, both breathing hard. Around them, the other men were carefully not watching, unloading the wagon with exaggerated focus. Finally, Colt said, Don't ever do that again. I can't promise that. Evelyn, if they come back, I'll do whatever needs doing, just like I did with Tom's leg, just like I do with everything else here. She lifted her chin. You hired me to manage this house. Well, protecting it is part of managing it. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite approval, but recognition. You're the most stubborn woman I've ever met. Good thing you like stubborn women, then. The corner of his mouth twitched. Did I say I liked it? You're still standing here arguing with me instead of firing me. I'm taking that as a positive sign. He shook his head, but the anger had drained away. Come on, let's get inside. I need to figure out what to do about these bastards. They spent the next hour in his office, going over the situation. Colt spread maps across his desk, marking locations where cattle had gone missing, tracking patterns. They're working a circuit, he said, hitting different ranches in sequence. We're just one target among many. That's why Fletcher wanted to form that association, Evelyn realized. If all the ranchers pooled resources, then we'd all be paying protection money to Fletcher's hand-picked security, and Fletcher would control every ranch in the territory. Colt's expression was grim. This whole thing stinks of setup. You think Fletcher's involved with the rustlers? I think Fletcher saw an opportunity. Whether he created it or just took advantage, I don't know, but either way, he's using it to consolidate power. Evelyn studied the maps. What if you went around him, talked to the other ranchers directly? Most of them already signed with Fletcher. The ones who didn't are either too small to matter or too stubborn to care. Like you. Like me. He leaned back in his chair. I've got 3 choices. Pay the rustlers, pay Fletcher, or fight this alone. What about a 4th option? Which is? Find out who's really behind the rustling operation. Cut the head off the snake instead of fighting the tail. Colt looked at her with something like respect. That's not a bad idea, except I have no idea where to start. Start with the money. The rustlers wanted $500 cash for 30 head of cattle. That's less than they're worth, which means they don't have a buyer yet. They're trying to get quick money before they move on. So they're not established here, they're passing through. Or they're working for someone who needs the cattle moved fast, someone who doesn't want to wait for market prices. Evelyn thought hard. Who benefits most from cheap cattle right now? Colt's eyes sharpened. The railroad. They're building through the territory, need beef for their workers. They're buying any cattle they can get, no questions asked about brands. So the rustlers steal cattle, sell them to the railroad, and disappear before anyone connects the dots. And Fletcher either doesn't know or he's taking a cut to look the other way. Colt stood, energy returning to his movements. Which means if I can prove the connection, I can destroy Fletcher's operation and solve the rustling problem at the same time. How do you prove it? Follow the money. And the cattle. He grabbed his hat. I need to ride to the railroad camp, see what they're buying and who they're buying from. When? Tomorrow. Maybe tonight if I can get the horses ready. Colt, you just got back, and I'll rest when this is done. He looked at her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. Besides, the longer I wait, the longer those bastards think they've got leverage. I need to move fast. She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he was pushing too hard, moving too fast, taking too many risks. But she'd seen the determination in his eyes. He was going to do this whether she approved or not. At least eat dinner first, she said, and sleep in a real bed for one night. Whatever you're planning can wait until morning. He hesitated, then nodded. Fair enough, but we leave at dawn.
We? Hayes and I, maybe Charlie too. I need someone here I trust to watch the place. His eyes held hers. Someone I trust to watch you. The weight of those words settled between them. Trust. It was such a simple thing, but out here, it meant everything. Be careful, Evelyn said quietly. Always am. No, you're not. You're reckless and stubborn, and you take chances that would make sensible people run the other way. She stepped closer. But that's your business. Just come back. This place needs you. This place? Or you? The question hung in the air, dangerous and electric. Evelyn should have deflected, should have laughed it off, should have remembered her place. Instead, she met his eyes and said, both. Something ignited in Colt's expression. He moved closer, close enough that she could feel the heat coming off him, close enough to see the flecks of silver in his gray eyes. Evelyn? A knock at the door shattered the moment. Jack's voice called, Boss? Charlie says there's smoke on the northern ridge. Colt's expression went hard in an instant. What kind of smoke? Looks like a fire, big one. He was moving before Jack finished talking, Evelyn right behind him. They burst out of the house to find all the men gathered, staring north. Even in the fading light, the smoke was visible, a dark column rising against the sky. That's the lumber camp, Charlie said. Or what's left of it. The lumber camp was on the edge of Colt's property, a small operation cutting timber for the railroad. 20 men worked there, living in rough cabins, dangerous work in dangerous conditions. Could be an accident, Hayes offered. Could be. But Colt's tone said he didn't believe it. Charlie, Jack, you're with me. Hayes, stay here with the others. Guard the house. I'm coming too, Evelyn said. Like hell. If there are injured men, you'll need someone who knows what they're doing, unless you've suddenly learned medicine since this morning. Colt looked like he wanted to argue, but he knew she was right. Fine. But you stay back until we know it's safe. They saddled horses and rode hard. The smoke grew thicker as they approached, and by the time they reached the camp, flames were visible through the trees. The scene was chaos. Men running with buckets, trying to save what they could. The main bunkhouse was already gone, just burning timber and ash. 2 of the supply sheds were still standing, but barely. Colt dismounted and grabbed the first man he saw. What happened? Don't know. Started in the bunkhouse, spread fast. We got most of the men out, but the man's face crumpled. Some didn't make it. Evelyn's medical training kicked in before emotion could. Show me who's hurt. They'd gathered the injured away from the flames. 5 men with burns, 3 with smoke inhalation, 1 who wasn't moving. Evelyn knelt beside him first, checking for a pulse. Nothing. She moved to the next man, forcing herself not to think about the one she couldn't help. This one was alive, his face blackened with soot, his breathing labored. Get me water, she called, and clean cloth. Anything that hasn't been in the smoke. For the next hour, she worked, treating burns, clearing airways, making sure no one went into shock. Colt and the others fought the fire, finally getting it under control as darkness fell completely. When the immediate crisis passed, Evelyn sat back on her heels, her hands shaking from exhaustion and adrenaline crash. Around her, wounded men lay on makeshift beds, alive because she'd been there. 1 dead because she hadn't been fast enough. Colt found her there, covered in soot and blood, staring at nothing. He knelt beside her. Evelyn? I couldn't save him. Her voice sounded strange in her own ears. The first one. He was already gone. That's not your fault. I know, but it doesn't help. He was quiet for a moment, then said, The fire wasn't an accident. Someone set it. The words cut through her grief, replacing it with cold anger. How do you know? Found traces of accelerant, kerosene probably. Someone wanted this camp destroyed. His jaw was tight. And I think I know why. The rustlers? More than that. This camp was cutting timber for the railroad, same railroad that's been buying cheap cattle. Someone's trying to disrupt their supply chain. But why? Could be competition. Could be someone trying to drive up prices. Or, he stopped, his eyes going distant. Or it's a distraction. While we're all focused on the fire, what else is happening? The realization hit them both at the same time. They looked at each other, horror dawning. The ranch, Evelyn whispered. They ran for the horses. The ride back felt twice as long as the ride out. Colt pushed the horses hard, harder than was safe in darkness.
but none of them protested. Evelyn clung to her saddle, her thighs screaming from the pace, fear making her heart pound so loud she could hear it over the thunder of hooves. Charlie and Jack flanked them, rifles drawn, eyes scanning the darkness for threats. The moon was nearly full, casting enough light to see the trail but creating shadows that could hide anything. When they crested the final ridge and looked down into the valley, Evelyn's breath caught. The ranch was burning. Not the house, not yet, but the main barn was engulfed in flames, orange and red painting the night sky. Even from this distance, they could hear the horses screaming. Colt didn't say a word. He just drove his horse faster, and they plunged down the slope in a controlled fall that felt like flying and dying at the same time. They hit the valley floor at a gallop. Evelyn could see figures moving around the fire, Hayes and the others fighting desperately to control the blaze. But there weren't enough of them. There would never be enough of them. Colt was off his horse before it fully stopped, running toward the barn. "How many horses inside?" "3," Hayes shouted back. "We got the others out, but these 3 are trapped in the back stalls." Without hesitation, Colt grabbed a wet blanket someone had dropped and threw it over his head. Then he ran straight into the burning building. "No!" Evelyn screamed, but he was already gone, swallowed by smoke and flame. Hayes grabbed her arm. "He knows what he's doing. He's going to die in there." "Maybe. But those horses definitely will if he doesn't try." Seconds stretched into hours. Evelyn couldn't breathe, couldn't think beyond the image of Colt burning alive in that inferno. Around her, men worked with buckets and wet blankets trying to contain the fire, but it was spreading too fast. Then movement at the barn door. A horse burst through, wild-eyed and terrified, nearly trampling Charlie in its panic. Behind it came another, then a third, and finally Colt, stumbling, coughing, the blanket smoking on his shoulders. He made it 10 feet from the barn before collapsing. Evelyn ran to him, her hands already checking for injuries. His face was blackened with soot, his eyebrows singed, his hands blistered from burns, but he was breathing. He was alive. "The horses," he rasped. "Did they? They made it. You saved them." She helped him sit up, away from the heat. "You idiot. You could have been killed." "Couldn't let them burn." His voice was raw from smoke. "Those horses are worth more than the barn." "You're worth more than the horses." He looked at her, something unreadable in his expression. "Am I?" Before she could answer, Hayes called out, "Boss, we found something!" They stumbled over to where Hayes stood at the side of the barn, holding a lantern over something on the ground. Empty bottles reeked of kerosene, rags that had been used as fuses, and pressed into the dirt, a boot print. "Same accelerant as the lumber camp," Charlie said grimly. "This was coordinated." Colt's face went hard to stone. "How many men did we have watching?" 4, including me, Hayes said. "But they hit us from 2 sides at once. We were spread too thin." "Anyone hurt?" "Billy took a knock on the head, but he'll live. They weren't trying to kill us, just keep us busy while they set the fire." Evelyn felt cold despite the heat from the burning barn. "They could have killed you, all of you. Why didn't they?" "Because dead men bring the law," Colt said. "Property damage is one thing. Murder's another. They wanted to send a message without crossing that line." "What message?" "That I can't protect what's mine. That I'm vulnerable." He turned to face the burning barn, watching years of work turn to ash. And that paying them would have been cheaper than this. The barn burned through the night. By dawn, it was just smoking ruins and the acrid smell of destruction. The horses they'd saved were corralled near the house, still skittish. The men moved like ghosts, exhausted and defeated. Evelyn stood on the porch, watching the sun rise over the devastation. Behind her, the house still stood, untouched, almost mocking in its safety. The rustlers could have burned it too. They could have killed everyone, but they hadn't. Because this wasn't about destruction, it was about control. Colt found her there as the first light turned the smoke golden. His hands were bandaged now, his face clean but still showing the marks of heat and ash. "You should sleep," he said. "So should you." "Can't. Too much to do." He leaned against the porch rail, staring at the ruins. "I need to rebuild. Need to figure out how to pay for it. Need to find these bastards before they destroy everything else. How much will it cost to rebuild?" "More than I have." The barn was insured, but not for replacement value. And that's assuming the insurance company pays it all, which they might not if they decide it was my fault somehow. Evelyn thought about the ledgers she'd seen in his office, the careful way he tracked every dollar. How bad is it? Bad enough that I might have to sell land, or cattle, or both. His voice was flat, emotionless. Everything I built, 15 years of work, and they're dismantling it piece by piece. Then stop them. I'm trying. No, you're reacting. You're playing their game on their terms. She turned to face him. You said it yourself. Follow the money. Find out who's really behind this and expose them. That takes time I might not have. Then buy time. Pay them. His head snapped toward her. What? Pay the $500. Get your cattle back. Make them think they've won. She could see him starting to object and pressed forward. You need those cattle, and you need them to think you're beaten. Once they're confident, they'll get sloppy. That's when you strike. That's a hell of a gamble. You've been gambling since you got here. Since you built this place from nothing, one more bet won't kill you. He studied her face for a long moment. When did you get so ruthless? I've always been ruthless. I just hid it better in Philadelphia. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. I'm starting to see that. He pushed off the rail. All right, we'll pay them, but I need you to do something for me. What? Come with me to town. Help me figure out exactly how much I can afford to lose before this whole thing collapses. Going to Red Hollow felt like walking into enemy territory. Evelyn sat beside Colt on the wagon seat, Hayes riding alongside for protection, and watched the town grow closer with a sense of dread. People would stare, they'd whisper, they'd judge. Let them, she thought. She'd survived worse than small-town gossip. They stopped first at the bank. Colt left Evelyn and Hayes outside while he went in to check his accounts. He emerged 20 minutes later, his face grim. Someone's been spreading rumors about my creditworthiness, he said. The bank manager wanted to call in my loans. I convinced him to hold off, but just barely. Fletcher, Evelyn said. Probably, or Blackwood, or both. He climbed back onto the wagon. Next stop is the insurance office. The insurance agent, a nervous man named Perkins, had the same story. I'm sorry, Mr. Mercer, but there's some question about whether the fire was truly accidental. Until we complete our investigation, how long will that take? Could be weeks, could be months. I need that money now to rebuild. Perkins shuffled papers on his desk. I understand, but protocol requires protocol. Colt's voice went cold. While you follow protocol, my ranch is vulnerable. My workers have nowhere to stable horses. My entire operation is at risk. I sympathize truly, but my hands are tied. They left the office with nothing. Evelyn could feel Colt's frustration radiating off him like heat. They're all in on it, he said as they walked toward the general store. Fletcher's got them all convinced I'm a bad risk. Then we prove you're not. How? Before she could answer, a familiar voice cut through the street noise. Well, well, if it isn't the woman nobody wanted. Warren Blackwood stood outside the saloon, flanked by two friends. All three men looked like they'd been drinking despite the early hour. Blackwood's face was flushed, his eyes bright with malice. Keep walking, Colt said quietly. But Blackwood wasn't done. Heard your barn burned down, Mercer. Shame about that. Almost like someone's trying to tell you something. Colt stopped. Evelyn felt Hayes tense beside her. You know something about that fire, Blackwood. Me? I don't know anything. Blackwood smiled. But I hear things. Hear that maybe you've made some enemies. Hear that maybe those enemies aren't going away just because you're stubborn. Is that a threat? Just friendly advice. From one businessman to another. Blackwood's eyes slid to Evelyn. Though I suppose you're too busy playing house with discarded goods to focus on actual business. The air went electric. Colt's hand moved toward his gun, and Evelyn knew with absolute certainty that someone was about to die. She stepped between them. Mr. Blackwood, she said, her voice carrying across the street. I want to thank you. That stopped him. What? Thank you for showing me exactly what kind of man you are before I made the mistake of marrying you. Thank you for being so shallow, so cruel, so utterly small that you rejected me in public. Because if you hadn't, I never would have found this job. Never would have discovered what it means to work for someone who actually values loyalty and honesty. She took a step closer, and Blackwood actually retreated.
You threw me away like trash, and you know what? It was the best thing you ever did for me.
Because now I get to wake up every day knowing I dodged a bullet. Knowing I didn't waste my life on a man whose greatest accomplishment is marrying money he didn't earn. Blackwood's face had gone from flushed to purple. You little... I'm not finished. Evelyn's voice cut like glass. You wanted to humiliate me, to make me feel worthless. But all you did was show this entire town who the real failure is. It's not the woman who survives. It's the man who needs to destroy others to feel powerful. The street had gone quiet. People had stopped to watch, drawn by the confrontation. Evelyn could feel their eyes, feel their judgment, but she didn't care anymore. So thank you, Mr. Blackwood. Thank you for your cowardice. Thank you for your cruelty. Thank you for being exactly the kind of man no woman should ever trust. She turned to Colt. I'm done here. Can we go? Colt's expression was somewhere between shock and admiration. Yeah, we can go. They walked away, leaving Blackwood standing there red-faced and speechless. Hayes followed, and Evelyn could swear she heard him chuckling under his breath. When they were out of earshot, Colt said, That was stupid? Reckless? I was going to say magnificent. He looked at her with something like awe. Remind me never to get on your bad side. Despite everything, Evelyn felt herself smile. Too late. You're already there. Am I? You hired me out of pity. That's offensive. I hired you because you looked like you'd rather die than quit. That's not pity. That's respect. The words hit her square in the chest, warm and unexpected. Before she could respond, a woman's voice called out, Miss Hart, is that you? Evelyn turned to find a woman emerging from the dress shop, middle-aged, kind-faced, wearing an apron dusted with flour. I'm Sarah Mitchell. I run the bakery down the street. The woman smiled. I heard what you just said to Warren Blackwood. Been waiting years for someone to knock that pompous fool down a peg. I probably shouldn't have. Nonsense, he deserved every word. Sarah glanced at Colt, then back at Evelyn. I also heard you've been working up at Mercer Ridge, that you set Tom Brennan's leg when it was broken. I did what needed doing. That's more than most would do. Sarah hesitated, then said, My husband runs the general store. Heard there's been some trouble with extending credit to Mr. Mercer here. Colt's expression hardened. That's right. Well, that's nonsense. Your credit's always been good with us, and it'll stay good. Fletcher doesn't control everything in this town, no matter what he thinks. She looked at Evelyn. And anyone who gives Warren Blackwood the dressing down he deserves is welcome in my store anytime. It was a small thing, one store owner going against Fletcher's pressure, but it felt like victory. Thank you, Evelyn said. That means more than you know. After Sarah left, they finished their errands and headed back to the ranch. The wagon was loaded with supplies, flour, coffee, sugar, all bought on credit that Sarah Mitchell had personally approved. You made an ally today, Colt said as they rolled out of town. We need all the allies we can get. Yeah, we do. He was quiet for a moment, then said, What you said to Blackwood, did you mean it? About being glad he rejected you. Evelyn thought about that morning on the platform, about the humiliation and fear. Thought about everything that had happened since. The work, the danger, the strange sense of belonging she'd found at Mercer Ridge. Yes, she said, I meant it. Good. Something in his voice made her look at him. Because I'm glad he was an idiot. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. The weight of those words settled between them, heavy with implication. Evelyn wanted to ask what he meant, wanted to push past the careful distance they'd maintained. But Hayes was riding beside them, and the ranch was waiting, and there were bigger problems than whatever was growing between a damaged rancher and a discarded bride. When they got back, Charlie met them with news. Ryder came by while you were gone. Left a message. From who? Didn't say. Just said to tell you the offer still stands. 3 days. Charlie's face was grim. That was 2 days ago, which means tomorrow. Colt finished. They want an answer tomorrow. That night, Colt gathered all the men in the house. 8 of them now. Hayes, Charlie, Jack, and 5 others whose names Evelyn had learned over the past weeks. Rough men, hard men, but loyal. Here's the situation, Colt said, spreading a map across the table. Tomorrow, I'm meeting the rustlers to pay for our cattle, $500 cash. Murmurs rippled through the group. Jack looked stricken. Boss, we can't afford not to. We need those cattle, and we need the rustlers to think they've beaten us. Colt's finger traced a route on the map. They'll expect me to come alone or with one man. Instead, I'm taking Hayes and Charlie. The rest of you stay here and guard the ranch. What if it's a trap? Hayes asked. It probably is. That's why you two are coming, to watch my back. And if they try to kill you anyway, then you make sure they don't succeed. Evelyn had been standing in the doorway, listening. Now she stepped forward. I'm coming too. Every head turned toward her. Colt's expression was already hardening into refusal. No. I'm the only one here who can read people, who can tell if they're lying. She met his eyes. You need to know if this deal is legitimate or if they're planning something worse. I can tell you that. By getting yourself killed? By staying alert and watching their reactions. By being smart instead of stubborn. They stared at each other, locked in another silent battle. Finally, Colt said, The answer is still no. Then I'll follow you anyway. Evelyn, you don't own me, Colt. I work for you, which means I have a say in protecting the investment I've made here. She crossed her arms. This ranch is my home now, too. I'm not sitting here waiting while you ride into danger. Charlie coughed, and it sounded suspiciously like a laugh. Hayes was grinning outright. Even Jack looked impressed. Colt's jaw worked, fury and frustration warring in his expression. You're the most infuriating woman I've ever met. You've mentioned that before. Answer's still yes. I'm coming. He was silent for a long moment, then said, Fine, but you stay back. You watch, and you listen, but you don't engage. The second things go bad, you ride like hell back here. Understood? Understood. I mean it, Evelyn. I'm not watching you die because you're too stubborn to run. Same to you. That got a surprised laugh from him, rough and unexpected. The tension in the room broke slightly, and the men relaxed. They spent the rest of the evening planning. The meeting point was a canyon 10 miles north, remote, difficult to approach without being seen. Perfect for an ambush. Colt would bring the money in saddlebags. Hayes and Charlie would position themselves on the ridges with rifles, covering his approach. Evelyn would stay with them, watching through field glasses. What if they don't bring the cattle? Jack asked. Then I don't pay them, and we figure out plan B. What's plan B? Colt's smile was cold. Bullets. That night, Evelyn couldn't sleep. She lay in bed thinking about all the ways tomorrow could go wrong, thinking about Colt riding into that canyon, about gunfire and blood, and the very real possibility that he wouldn't come back. Around midnight, she gave up and went downstairs. Found him in his office, cleaning his rifle by lamplight. Can't sleep either? She asked from the doorway. Too much to think about. She came in and sat in the chair across from his desk. Are you scared? Terrified. He said it matter-of-factly, like he was commenting on the weather. But fear's not a bad thing, keeps you sharp. My father used to say that, right before his business collapsed. Your father wasn't wrong, he just got unlucky. Colt set down the rifle. Sometimes you do everything right and still lose. That's not failure, that's life. Is that what you tell yourself when things go bad? Every damn day. He leaned back in his chair, and in the lamplight, he looked older, tired, human. You want to know the truth? I'm not sure I can win this. Fletcher's got money, connections, political power. I've got land and stubbornness. That might not be enough. So why keep fighting? Because if I don't, men like Fletcher win. Men who think power gives them the right to destroy anyone who won't bow down. His eyes met hers. And because there are people depending on me now. People who deserve better than watching everything collapse. Like your workers? Like my workers. Like Tom with his newly healed leg. Like Sarah Mitchell who stuck her neck out today. He paused. Like you. The admission hung between them, raw and honest. Evelyn felt her heart beating too fast, felt the pull of something she couldn't quite name. I'm not your responsibility, Colt. Maybe not. But you're here because of me. Because I offered you this job. If something happens to you, nothing's going to happen to me. You don't know that. Neither do you. She leaned forward. We could sit here all night listing the things that might go wrong. Or we could get some sleep and face tomorrow when it comes. He smiled, tired but genuine. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise. You were just too stubborn to notice. Seems like stubborn is our shared vocabulary. Seems like it. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Colt said, "Thank you." For what? For not running. For staying even when things got dangerous. For standing up to Blackwood today. For... He stopped, searching for words. For making this place feel less empty. Evelyn's throat tightened. It's not empty. You have good men here. People who care about you. That's not what I meant. She knew what he meant, could feel it in the space between them, in the way his eyes held hers. But acknowledging it meant crossing a line they couldn't uncross. Meant admitting that somewhere between that first morning on the platform and this moment in the lamplight, they'd become more than employer and employee. Get some sleep, she said finally, standing. We have a long day tomorrow. He nodded, not pushing. You too. She made it to the door before he called her name. She turned back. Evelyn? Tomorrow. If things go bad, if something happens, nothing's going to happen. But if it does, he stopped, then said simply, don't do anything heroic. Just stay alive. That's all I'm asking. Same to you, Colt. Same to you. She climbed the stairs to her room, crawled into bed, and finally, mercifully, slept. Dawn came too fast. They rode out as the sun touched the eastern mountains, Colt, Hayes, Charlie, and Evelyn. The saddlebags were heavy with money that represented months of careful saving. The rifles were loaded. The horses were tense, sensing their riders' unease. The canyon was exactly where the rustlers said it would be. A narrow passage between two ridges, with enough cover for an army to hide. Colt studied it through field glasses, his face unreadable. They're already here, he said. I count at least 6 men, probably more in the rocks. That's twice what they said, Charlie muttered. Yeah, they're not taking chances. Colt handed the glasses to Hayes. You and Charlie get into position on the north ridge. Evelyn stays with you. If shooting starts, you cover my retreat. And if they kill you before you can retreat? Hayes asked bluntly. Then you kill as many of them as you can and get Evelyn out safely. Colt, Evelyn started. That's an order. His eyes found hers. I need to know you'll be safe. Otherwise, I can't do this. She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him his life mattered more than hers, but she could see the determination in his face, the weight of responsibility he carried. All right, she said quietly. I'll stay safe. You do the same. He nodded once, then spurred his horse toward the canyon entrance. Evelyn, Hayes, and Charlie rode quickly to the north ridge and dismounted. They climbed into position among the rocks, rifles ready, watching Colt disappear into the canyon below. Through the field glasses, Evelyn could see everything. The rustlers emerging from cover, 7 of them, just as Colt had said. The leader with the split lip stepping forward, Colt dismounting slowly, hands visible, non-threatening. They were talking, but she was too far away to hear words. She watched body language instead, reading the tension in shoulders, the position of hands near weapons. The leader seemed confident, almost bored. His men were alert but not aggressive. This might actually work. Then everything went to hell. One of the rustlers, a young man, jumpy, drew his gun. Colt moved fast, diving behind his horse as gunfire erupted. Hayes and Charlie opened fire from the ridge, their shots echoing through the canyon. We need to go down there, Evelyn shouted. No! Hayes fired again. We stay here and cover him like he said. Below, Colt was pinned behind his horse, returning fire with his pistol. The rustlers had scattered, using the canyon walls for cover. It was chaos, bullets and dust and screaming horses. Then Evelyn saw something that made her blood freeze. 3 more riders emerging from the far end of the canyon, cutting off Colt's escape route. Not rustlers. Their clothes were too fine, their horses too expensive, and leading them was a face she recognized from town. Richard Fletcher. That's Fletcher, Evelyn said, her voice tight with disbelief. He's with them. Hayes swore viciously. He set this whole thing up, the rustling, the fires, all of it. Charlie was already repositioning his rifle. We need to get down there now. But Evelyn was thinking faster than either of them. Fletcher showing up meant this wasn't just about stealing cattle or burning barns. This was an execution dressed up as a business deal. They'd planned to kill Colt from the start, take his money, and blame it on the rustlers. If we go down there, we're outnumbered 3-1, she said. We need a different approach. What approach? The boss is pinned down. Evelyn scanned the canyon, her mind racing. The rustlers were focused on Colt, using the rocks for cover. Fletcher and his men were approaching from the south, confident. They thought they had this won, but they'd made a mistake. They'd all clustered in the canyon, a natural kill box if you could get above them. And Evelyn was already above them. Give me your rifle, she said to Hayes. What? No, shit. I'm not going to shoot anyone. But they don't know that. She grabbed the rifle from his hands before he could protest. When I fire, you two move down the east slope and get to Colt. Understood? What are you planning? Something stupid. Now move when I tell you. Before they could stop her, Evelyn stood up on the ridge, fully visible against the sky. She aimed the rifle at the canyon floor, not at any person, but at the ground near Fletcher's horse, and fired. The shot cracked like thunder. Fletcher's horse reared, throwing him. The rustlers spun toward the sound, confused. And in that moment of chaos, Hayes and Charlie moved. They scrambled down the slope, using the distraction Evelyn had created. She fired again, then again, not to hit anyone, just to keep heads down, keep everyone confused about where the real threat was. A bullet whined past her head, close enough that she felt the displacement of air. She dropped behind the rocks, her heart hammering. Someone had spotted her. Someone was shooting back. Another bullet struck the rock inches from her face, spraying chips that stung her cheek. She scrambled backward, knowing she'd just made herself a target, knowing she'd done exactly what Colt had told her not to do. But Hayes and Charlie had reached him. She could see them through gaps in the rocks, see them laying down covering fire while Colt remounted his horse. They were going to make it out. Then she heard boots on stone behind her. Evelyn spun around to find two men climbing up from the opposite side of the ridge, rustlers who'd circled around during the chaos. One of them was grinning, the other looked grim and professional.
Well now, the grinning one said.
Looks like we caught ourselves a bird. Evelyn raised the rifle, but her hands were shaking. She'd never shot at a person before, never even considered it. The weight of that choice froze her for a crucial second. The grim one moved fast, knocking the rifle from her hands. It clattered down the rocks, out of reach. Don't make this harder than it needs to be, lady. Touch her and you're dead men. The voice came from below, cold and absolute. Colt stood 20 feet down the slope, his pistol aimed steady at the grim man's chest. Behind him, Hayes and Charlie had their rifles trained on the grinning one. Back away from her, Colt said. Slowly. The rustlers exchanged glances. The grim one calculated odds and came up short. He raised his hand, stepping back. His companion did the same. Now drop your guns and get down the slope. If I see you again, I won't ask questions first. The rustlers complied, sliding down the loose shale, stumbling in their haste. Colt climbed up to Evelyn, his face a mask of fury and relief. Are you hurt? No, What the hell were you thinking? The fury won. I told you to stay back. You were going to die down there. So you decided to paint a target on yourself instead. He grabbed her shoulders and she could feel him shaking. Do you have any idea what they would have done to you if I hadn't gotten here? I knew you'd come. That's not the point. He looked like he wanted to shake her or maybe pull her close. Instead, he just dropped his hands and turned away. We need to move. Now, before they regroup. They scrambled down the slope to where the horses waited. Evelyn's legs felt like water, adrenaline crash hitting hard. Hayes helped her mount while Charlie kept watch. What about Fletcher? Hayes asked. Leave him. Colt's voice was arctic. I want him to go back and tell everyone what happened here. Want him to know I'm not beaten. They rode hard, not stopping until they were miles from the canyon. When they finally slowed, Colt pulled up beside Evelyn. You saved my life back there, he said quietly. Stupid as hell, but you saved it. You would have done the same. That's different. Why? Because you're a man and I'm a woman? Because you're the boss and I'm just the housekeeper? She met his eyes. We're partners in this now, Colt, whether you like it or not. He stared at her for a long moment, then said, Partners don't lie to each other. I haven't lied. Margaret came by the ranch a week ago. You never told me. Evelyn felt her stomach drop. How did you? Jack mentioned seeing a fancy wagon, described the woman. His expression was unreadable. Why didn't you tell me? She could lie now, make excuses. But he was right.
Partners didn't lie to each other. Because I thought she'd hurt you enough already, and I didn't want to watch her do it again. That wasn't your decision to make. I know, and I'm sorry. She held his gaze. But I'd do it again, because you matter, and protecting you matters more than following rules about what's proper. Something shifted in his face. The anger drained away, replaced by something softer, more dangerous. You can't keep doing that. Doing what? Making me feel like maybe I'm worth protecting. The rawness in his voice made her chest ache. You are worth it, Colt, even if you don't believe it. He looked away, jaw tight. Then he spurred his horse forward, ending the conversation. They made it back to the ranch as darkness fell. The other men came running, weapons ready, until they saw who it was. Relief flooded their faces. What happened? Jack asked. Ambush, Colt said shortly, dismounting. Fletcher's behind the rustling. Whole thing was a setup to either take my money or kill me, maybe both. Shocked silence. Then Charlie said, That son of a bitch. That means he's been orchestrating everything. The fires, the stolen cattle, all of it. Yeah. Colt handed his reins to Jack. Which means this is about to get worse before it gets better. Fletcher can't let me live now that I know the truth. He'll come at us with everything he has. What do? We prove it. We find evidence that connects Fletcher to the rustlers, and we take it to the territorial marshal. Let the law handle him. The law? Hayes sounded skeptical. Since when do you trust the law? Since I realized fighting this alone will get us all killed. Colt rubbed his face, exhaustion catching up. We need allies. Real ones. People with power who can stand against Fletcher. Where do we find people like that? Colt was quiet for a moment, then said, I need to send some telegrams. Tonight. Hayes, you're writing to Cheyenne. Find the marshal's office. Tell them what happened. Tell them Richard Fletcher is running a criminal operation and we have evidence. What evidence? Leave that to me. He looked at Charlie. Double the guards. No one rides alone. And if you see Fletcher or anyone connected to him, you shoot first and apologize later. The men dispersed to their tasks. Evelyn started toward the house, but Colt caught her arm. We need to talk, he said. About what? About what happens next. Come on. He led her to his office and closed the door. In the lamplight, she could see the toll the day had taken, the lines around his eyes, the set of his shoulders. He looked like a man carrying weight that might finally break him. Sit down, he said. She sat. He paced, organizing his thoughts. Fletcher's going to retaliate, he finally said. Tonight, tomorrow, soon. He can't let me expose him, which means he needs to either discredit me or eliminate me, probably both. So we move first. Yeah, but here's the problem. If I go after Fletcher directly, I look like the aggressor, the crazy rancher attacking a respectable businessman. That plays right into his narrative. He stopped pacing, faced her. I need someone Fletcher won't see as a threat, someone who can get close enough to find the proof we need. Understanding hit her like cold water. You want me to go back to town? I want you to visit Sarah Mitchell, build on that connection you made, ask questions, listen to gossip, find out who Fletcher's been meeting with, where money's been moving, anything that doesn't add up. That's dangerous. Everything's dangerous now, but you're right. We're partners, and I need my partner doing what she does best. Which is? Reading people, seeing connections others miss, being underestimated. His eyes held hers. You walked into that canyon today and changed the entire fight with 3 rifle shots. Imagine what you could do with information and time. Evelyn thought about it, turning the idea over. It made sense in a cold, tactical way. Fletcher wouldn't see her as a threat, just a discarded bride working as a housekeeper. She could ask questions, build relationships, gather evidence while Fletcher focused on Colt. When would I go? Tomorrow. I'll send you with Jack. He's young enough that people won't think twice about him being in town. You buy supplies, talk to Sarah, see what you can learn. He paused. But if it feels wrong, if Fletcher or Blackwood show up, you leave immediately. Understood? Understood. Evelyn. He stepped closer, and she could see the fear underneath his careful control. I can't lose you. Not after today, not after... He stopped, searching for words. Just be careful. Please. I will. I promise. They stood there, the space between them charged with everything unsaid. Then Colt did something that surprised her.
He pulled her into a hug, brief, fierce, and then over before she could fully process it. "Get some sleep," he said, his voice rough. "Tomorrow's going to be a long day." Evelyn climbed the stairs to her room, her mind spinning. She lay in bed thinking about Fletcher's face in that canyon, about the casual way he'd orchestrated violence, thinking about Colt's arms around her, the raw fear in his voice when he'd told her to be careful. Somewhere between Philadelphia and this moment, she'd stopped being just a survivor. She'd become a fighter. And tomorrow, she'd prove it. Morning came gray and cold, threatening rain. Evelyn dressed carefully, not her work dress, but the better one she'd been saving. She needed to look respectable, trustworthy, the kind of woman who couldn't possibly be gathering intelligence. Jack was waiting by the wagon, looking nervous. "You sure about this, Miss Hart?" "Not even a little bit, but we're doing it anyway." The ride to Red Hollow took 2 hours. Evelyn spent it rehearsing conversations in her head, planning questions that would seem innocent but yield useful answers. By the time they rolled down the main street, she felt as ready as she'd ever be. Sarah Mitchell's bakery was warm and smelled like fresh bread. Sarah herself looked up from the counter, her face brightening. "Evelyn, I wasn't expecting to see you so soon. I needed to come to town for supplies. Thought I'd stop by and thank you properly for extending credit yesterday." "Oh, that was nothing. Harold was happy to do it. He's always said Colt Mercer is good for his debts." Sarah wiped flour from her hands. "Can I get you some coffee? Fresh biscuits?" "That would be lovely." They sat in the small room behind the bakery, away from customers. Sarah poured coffee and settled into her chair with a sigh. "How are things at the ranch?" she asked. "Heard there was a fire." "The barn burned down a couple nights ago." Evelyn wrapped her hands around the warm cup. "Mr. Mercer thinks it was arson." Sarah's eyes widened. "Arson? Who would—" She stopped, understanding crossing her face. "Fletcher." "We don't have proof." "You don't need proof. Everyone knows he's been trying to drive Colt out for months, ever since Colt refused to join that cattlemen's association." Sarah leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Can I tell you something? In confidence?" "Of course. My husband sits on the town council. 2 weeks ago, Fletcher proposed a new ordinance, something about requiring ranchers to carry expensive insurance policies. Only the insurance company he recommended? It's owned by Fletcher's brother-in-law in Denver. The whole thing's a scheme to extract money." Evelyn's mind raced. "Did the ordinance pass?" "Not yet. Harold and a few others voted it down. But Fletcher's not done pushing. He's been meeting with people, offering deals, making threats. My husband thinks he's trying to take over the whole territory, one ranch at a time." "Has anyone tried to stop him?" "How?" "He owns the bank, controls the credit, has the sheriff in his pocket. Anyone who goes against him finds themselves suddenly unable to do business." Sarah's expression was troubled. "I'm risking a lot just talking to you like this." "I know, and I appreciate it more than you know. Just tell Colt to be careful. Fletcher's dangerous when cornered, and right now, Colt's the only one with enough land and money to pose a real threat to his plans." They talked for another hour, Sarah sharing gossip that painted a picture of Fletcher's web of control. The sheriff who looked the other way when Fletcher's friends broke the law. The judge who always ruled in Fletcher's favor. The newspaper editor who refused to print anything critical of Fletcher's business dealings. By the time Evelyn left the bakery, her head was spinning with information. She met Jack at the general store, where he'd been loading supplies. "Learn anything useful?" he asked quietly. "More than I expected. Let's get back before— Well, look who decided to show her face in town." Evelyn turned to find Warren Blackwood standing on the boardwalk, 3 friends flanking him. They all looked like they'd already been drinking, despite the early hour. "Mr. Blackwood," she said evenly, "if you'll excuse us, heard about Mercer's barn burning down. Terrible tragedy." His smile was nasty. "Heard there was some trouble up at the lumber camp, too. Almost like someone's trying to tell him something. Is there a point to this conversation? Just wanted to offer my condolences. Must be hard watching your employer lose everything. Makes you wonder if you shouldn't have taken that train back east when you had the chance." Jack stepped forward, his young face set with determination. "You need to walk away now." Blackwood laughed. "Or what? You'll tell your boss? Mercer's got bigger problems than protecting his housemaid's feelings. That housemaid set Tom Brennan's broken leg, treated half the men on our ranch, and probably knows more about running a successful operation than you ever will. Jack's voice carried across the street, drawing attention. So yeah, I'll tell my boss, and I'll tell him how you and Fletcher are trying to intimidate a woman because you're too coward to face him directly. Color flooded Blackwood's face. You watch your mouth, boy. Or what? You'll run to Fletcher. Everyone already knows you're his lapdog, just like everyone knows this whole rustling problem started right after Colt refused to pay Fletcher's protection money. Blackwood's hand moved toward his jacket, and Evelyn's heart stopped. But before he could draw whatever weapon he carried, the sheriff appeared. Gentlemen, Sheriff Morgan said lazily, let's not have trouble in the street.
No trouble here, Jack said firmly. Just loading supplies and heading home. The sheriff's eyes moved to Evelyn. That true, Miss Hart? Completely true. We're leaving now. See that you do. They climbed onto the wagon, and Jack snapped the reins. As they rolled out of town, Evelyn could feel eyes watching from windows and doorways, could feel the weight of attention that came from standing up to men like Blackwood. That was incredibly brave, she told Jack, and incredibly stupid. Learn from the best. He glanced at her. Besides, someone needed to say it. Whole town's afraid of Fletcher and Blackwood, but being afraid doesn't make them right. No, Evelyn agreed. It doesn't. They made it halfway back to the ranch before Evelyn noticed the riders behind them. 3 men, keeping pace at a distance, following them. Jack, she said quietly, we have company. He looked back, his jaw tightening. I see them. Can we outrun them? Not with this load. Wagon's too heavy. He thought for a moment, then said, there's a homestead about 2 miles ahead, the Patterson place. They're good people. We can shelter there. And if they follow us? Then we make a stand. He reached under the seat and pulled out a rifle. Can you shoot? I've never tried. Today might be a good day to learn. The Patterson homestead appeared over a rise. A small house, a barn, fields showing the first signs of cultivation. Jack drove the wagon straight to the house and jumped down, helping Evelyn descend. An older man emerged, rifle already in hand. Jack Morrison, what's the trouble? We're being followed, Mr. Patterson. 3 riders. They've been tracking us since Red Hollow. Patterson's eyes narrowed. He was in his 60s, weathered and cautious. Friends of yours? Definitely not. Then they're not welcome here either. Get inside. Mary'll give you coffee while we sort this out. Patterson's wife, a sturdy woman with kind eyes, ushered Evelyn inside while the men positioned themselves with clear sightlines. Evelyn watched through the window as the 3 riders approached. They stopped 50 yards from the house. The lead rider called out, We're looking for Colt Mercer's people. Got a message for them. Then deliver it and move on, Patterson shouted back. Messages for them, not you. I'm right here, Evelyn called from the window before anyone could stop her. What's your message? The rider smiled, and it wasn't friendly. Fletcher says to tell Mercer he's got 48 hours. Either he sells his land and leaves the territory, or Fletcher starts taking it piece by piece, starting with the people who work for him. That's a threat, Patterson said flatly. That's a promise. Fletcher's done playing games. He wanted Mercer to have the choice, though. 48 hours. Clock's ticking. They turned their horses and rode away, leaving silence in their wake. Patterson looked at Jack. This the kind of trouble Mercer's been dealing with? This is just today's installment. Then you tell him he's got friends. Tell him if Fletcher wants a fight, there's more than one stubborn rancher in this territory willing to push back. Patterson's face was set with determination. And tell him to get that evidence to the marshal fast, before Fletcher decides killing's easier than waiting. They made it back to the ranch by late afternoon. Colt met them at the door, his face tight with worry that eased when he saw Evelyn unharmed. Fletcher sent a message, she said without preamble. 48 hours to sell and leave, or he starts targeting your people. Colt's expression went arctic. He actually said that? His riders did. 3 of them followed us from town, cornered us at the Patterson place. Did they hurt you? No, Mr. Patterson ran them off. But Colt, Fletcher's not bluffing anymore. He's desperate, which makes him dangerous. Then we move faster. He gestured them inside. Hayes made it to Cheyenne. Sent a telegram saying the marshal's sending a deputy. Should be here in 3 days. Fletcher gave us 48 hours. I know, which means we hold out for 1 more day, then we have the law on our side. He looked at Jack. Any trouble in town besides the riders?
Jack recounted the confrontation with Blackwood, including his own speech about Fletcher and the rustlers. Colt listened, his expression unreadable. "You called Fletcher out publicly," he said when Jack finished. "That takes guts." "Or stupidity," Jack said, echoing Evelyn's earlier words. "Sometimes they're the same thing." Colt clapped him on the shoulder. "But you did good. Planted seeds of doubt where they needed planting. Now get some rest. I need you fresh for tonight's watch." After Jack left, Colt turned to Evelyn. "What did Sarah tell you?" She repeated everything: the ordinance, the insurance scheme, Fletcher's meetings with the sheriff and judge. Watched Colt's face darken as the scope of Fletcher's operation became clear. "He's building an empire," Colt said quietly, "using the rustlers to weaken ranches, then swooping in with his association to protect everyone. Anyone who refuses gets targeted until they're bankrupt or dead. And you're the biggest obstacle to that plan. Yeah, my land sits right in the middle of the territory. He can't control the region without controlling me." He rubbed his face. "I should have seen this coming." "How could you? You were just trying to run your ranch." "That's the problem. I was so focused on my own land, my own business, I didn't see the bigger picture. Didn't realize Fletcher was orchestrating everything." He met her eyes. "But now I know. And now I can fight back properly." "How?" "By doing what he doesn't expect. Tomorrow morning, I'm riding to every ranch within 50 miles. I'm telling them what Fletcher's doing. I'm offering to share evidence with anyone willing to stand against him. He'll know you're organizing resistance." "Good. Let him know. Let him scramble to protect himself." Colt's smile was sharp. "He thinks he controls the territory. Time to show him how wrong he is." "That's a big gamble. Everything's been a gamble since I got here. Might as well bet everything on one final hand." Evelyn wanted to argue, wanted to tell him it was too dangerous, but she could see the determination in his eyes, could see that he'd already made up his mind. "Then I'm coming with you," she said. "Evelyn, you need someone who can talk to the ranchers' wives, someone who can make the case from a different angle. And you need a witness, someone who can corroborate your story if Fletcher tries to discredit you." He studied her face for a long moment. "You know he'll come after you for this. Once you publicly ally yourself with me, Fletcher will destroy your reputation. What's left of it, anyway. My reputation was destroyed the minute Blackwood rejected me on that platform. This is just me choosing which side I'm on." She lifted her chin. "Besides, my reputation isn't what matters here. Stopping Fletcher is." "You're absolutely certain?" "I've never been more certain of anything." Something shifted in his expression. Pride, maybe? Or something deeper. "All right. We leave at dawn. Be ready for a long ride and hostile receptions." "I'm always ready for hostile receptions. I live in Wyoming territory now." That got a surprised laugh from him. Rough, but genuine. "Yeah, you do." That night, Evelyn lay in bed thinking about the choice she'd made. Tomorrow she'd burn every bridge back to her old life. She'd become publicly aligned with Colt Mercer, the dangerous rancher everyone feared. She'd make herself a target in Fletcher's war. But she'd also become something more than just a survivor. She'd become someone who fought back, someone who stood for something larger than her own safety. Through the window, she could see stars scattered across the Wyoming sky, the same stars that had watched over her journey west, over every decision that had led her here. She thought about her father, about what he would have said about the risks she was taking, and she realized with sudden clarity that he would have been proud. He'd raised her to be strong, to be smart, to be someone who didn't back down when things got hard. It had just taken losing everything to remember that. Tomorrow, she'd ride out with Colt and change everything. Tomorrow, the real fight would begin. But tonight, she let herself feel something close to peace. Because whatever happened next, she knew she was exactly where she needed to be. Dawn broke cold and clear, the kind of morning that promised either new beginnings or final endings. Evelyn dressed in her riding clothes, the practical ones she'd borrowed from the ranch's supply of spare gear, and braided her hair tight. Today wasn't about looking respectable. Today was about survival. Colt was already in the kitchen when she came down, coffee brewing, maps spread across the table. He looked up when she entered, and something passed between them. Acknowledgement of what they were about to do, acceptance of the cost. "We'll hit the Morrison Ranch first," he said, pointing to the map. "Then swing north to the Callahan place, east to the Hendersons. If we push hard, we can reach 5 ranches before nightfall." And if Fletcher's men find us, then we deal with it. He rolled up the maps. Hayes and Charlie are coming with us. Jack stays here with the others to guard the property. They rode out as the sun touched the eastern mountains, 4 riders against the vastness of Wyoming territory. The landscape rolled past in waves of grass and stone, beautiful and brutal in equal measure. Evelyn had learned to appreciate this country, its honesty, its refusal to pretend things were easy when they weren't. The Morrison Ranch came first, a solid operation run by a man in his 50s who'd fought in the same war as Colt. He listened to their story with a weathered face that gave nothing away. Fletcher approached me 2 months ago, Morrison said finally. Wanted me to join his association. When I refused, I lost 3 head of cattle the next week. Found them butchered, left to rot. Message was clear. Did you report it? To who? Sheriff Morgan? Morrison spat. He came out, looked around, said it was probably wolves. Everyone knows there haven't been wolves in this valley for 10 years. So you paid Fletcher? Yeah, I paid. Seemed easier than fighting. Morrison's eyes were hard with shame and anger. But if you're organizing resistance, if there's a real chance to stop him, I'm in. It won't be easy. He'll retaliate. Let him try. I've got 3 sons and enough ammunition to hold off an army. Morrison stood, offering his hand. You need help. You send word. We'll come running. 1 ranch, 1 ally. It was a start. The Callahan place was next, run by a widow named Elizabeth, who'd inherited the property when her husband died. She was Evelyn's age, tough and no nonsense, with 2 young children playing in the yard. Fletcher's been pressuring me to sell, Elizabeth said, pouring coffee for them in her kitchen. Says a woman can't run a ranch alone. Says I'd be better off taking his offer and moving back east. What did you tell him? Evelyn asked. Told him to go to hell. Elizabeth's smile was sharp. I built this place with my husband. Buried him on that hill overlooking the valley. I'm not giving it up because some banker thinks women are too weak to hold land. Fletcher won't accept that answer. I know. That's why I've been sleeping with a rifle next to my bed for 3 months. She looked at Colt. You're organizing something? Trying to. We're gathering evidence, waiting for the territorial marshal to arrive. But I need people willing to stand together. Show Fletcher he can't pick us off one by one. Elizabeth was quiet for a moment, looking out the window at her children. Then she said, I'm in. But I need your word that if something happens to me, you'll make sure my kids are taken care of. You have it, Colt said without hesitation. Good. Elizabeth stood. Now get out of here before someone sees you and reports back to Fletcher. You've got more ranches to visit. They rode through the afternoon, stopping at every property Colt knew. Some ranchers welcomed them, sharing stories of Fletcher's intimidation and expressing relief that someone was finally fighting back. Others were too afraid, turning them away with apologetic faces and locked doors. By the time they reached the Henderson Ranch, their final stop, the sun was setting and Evelyn was exhausted from hours in the saddle. Her thighs ached, her back was stiff, and her face felt sunburned despite her hat. Old man Henderson was in his 70s, still sharp despite his age. He listened to their pitch while whittling a piece of wood, his knife moving with practiced ease. You're asking people to risk everything, he said when Colt finished. Their land, their livelihoods, maybe their lives. That's a hell of a thing to ask. I know, but the alternative is watching Fletcher take everything anyway, just slower. True enough. Henderson studied his whittling. You know what the problem is with men like Fletcher? They think power is about control, about forcing people to bend, but real power, the kind that lasts, comes from people choosing to stand together. That's what I'm trying to build. I know, and that's why I'm in. Henderson set down his knife. But you need to understand something. This doesn't end with Fletcher. There'll always be another man trying to take what isn't his, another scheme to steal land and crush people who won't bow. You stop Fletcher, you're just winning one battle. The war never really ends. So what do you suggest? Build something that lasts beyond the fight. Don't just defend your land. Create a community that protects each other. Make it so the next Fletcher thinks twice before trying this in your territory. Henderson's eyes were shrewd. You've got something special with these people you're gathering. Don't waste it on just surviving. Use it to build something better. They rode back to Mercer Ridge in darkness, the horses picking their way carefully over uncertain ground. Evelyn's mind churned with everything they'd learned, every story of intimidation and fear. Fletcher's web was larger than she'd realized, more insidious, but so was the resistance building against him. When they finally reached the ranch, exhausted and saddle-sore, Jack met them with news that made Evelyn's blood run cold. The marshal's deputy arrived early. He's inside with Tom and Billy, said he needed to see the boss immediately. Colt exchanged a glance with Evelyn. That was fast. Too fast, Hayes muttered. They entered the house to find a man in his 30s wearing a deputy's badge, standing by the fireplace with the easy confidence of someone who knew he held power. He turned when they entered, and his smile didn't reach his eyes. Colt Mercer? I'm Deputy Frank Warren. Marshal sent me to investigate your claims about Richard Fletcher. That was fast, Colt said carefully. We only sent the telegram yesterday. Marshal takes accusations against prominent citizens seriously. Wanted me here before things escalated. Warren's eyes moved to Evelyn. And you must be Miss Hart. Heard a lot about you. I'm sure you have. Quite a story. Mail-order bride becomes housekeeper, ends up in the middle of a range war. His tone suggested he found it amusing. Mind telling me your version of events? Evelyn looked at Colt, who nodded slightly. She recounted everything. Blackwood's rejection, Colt's job offer, the fires, the rustlers, Fletcher's appearance in the canyon. Warren listened with an expression of polite interest that never quite became belief. That's quite an accusation, he said when she finished. You're saying Richard Fletcher, one of the territory's most respected businessmen, is running a criminal enterprise? I'm saying we saw him with the rustlers. I'm saying there's a pattern of intimidation that... Patterns aren't proof, Miss Hart. They're interpretation. Warren turned to Colt. You have any actual evidence? Documents? Witnesses willing to testify? Anything solid? I have ranchers who'll confirm Fletcher's been extorting them. Extortion is a strong word. Could be they misunderstood business negotiations. Could be you're not interested in actually investigating, Hayes said flatly. Warren's smile hardened. Careful, Cowboy. I'm here to help. But I need evidence, not conspiracy theories from people with grudges. What do you need? Colt asked, his voice tight with controlled anger. Real proof. Fletcher's business records, witness statements from the rustlers themselves, something that directly connects him to illegal activity. Warren adjusted his badge. Until then, my hands are tied. Can't investigate a man just because his competitors don't like him. He burned down my barn. You have proof of that? Did you see him do it? No, but then you don't have proof. You have suspicion. Warren moved toward the door. I'll file a report with the marshal, let him know the situation. But unless you can bring me something concrete, there's nothing I can do. Sorry. He left, and the room erupted. That son of a bitch is bought, Charlie said. Fletcher got to him first. Or he was Fletcher's man from the start, Hayes added. Probably sent that telegram to Fletcher the moment we filed the complaint. Colt stood silent, his face like stone. Then he turned to his office without a word. Evelyn followed, closing the door behind them. He's right, Colt said quietly, staring at his maps. We don't have proof. We have stories and suspicions, but nothing that would hold up legally. So what do? We get proof. He looked at her, and there was something dangerous in his eyes. The rustlers are holding our cattle somewhere. If we can find where, if we can prove Fletcher's connection to them, that's suicide. You're talking about tracking armed criminals to their hideout. I'm talking about ending this, tonight, before Fletcher can move against us again. Colt, I'm not asking you to come. I'm not asking any of the men. I'll go alone if I have to. Like hell you will. Evelyn crossed her arms. You go, I go. That's the deal. This isn't some debate about housekeeping duties. People are going to die tonight. Then I'll be there to treat the wounded. Or have you forgotten I'm the closest thing you have to a doctor? She met his eyes. You're not doing this alone. None of this. Not anymore. They stared at each other, locked in familiar stubbornness. Finally, Colt said, You know I can't stop you, don't you? I was counting on that. You're going to get us both killed. Maybe, but at least we'll go down fighting. She moved closer. Besides, you're forgetting something. What's that? I'm the one who figured out Fletcher's pattern. I'm the one who connected the rustlers to the railroad. You need me for this, whether you want to admit it or not. He was quiet for a long moment, then said, Yeah, I do. He turned back to the maps. The rustlers have to be somewhere within a day's ride of here, close enough to monitor our ranch, far enough to avoid detection. There are 3 canyons that would work as holding pens. We check them one by one until we find our cattle. And then? Then we document everything. Brands, numbers, anything that proves these are stolen animals. Then we force the rustlers to tell us about Fletcher's involvement.
Force them how? However necessary. His voice was cold. I'm done playing by rules that only protect men like Fletcher. They gathered the men, Hayes, Charlie, Jack, and 3 others willing to ride into danger. Colt laid out the plan with brutal efficiency. They'd split into 2 groups, check the canyons simultaneously. Any group that found the cattle would signal with gunfire. The other would come running.
This is dangerous, Colt told them. More dangerous than anything we've faced so far. Anyone who wants to stay behind, no judgment. You'll still have a job when this is over. No one moved. These men had chosen their side and they were sticking to it. They rode out under cover of darkness, the moon bright enough to see by, but dim enough to hide their approach. Evelyn rode beside Colt, fear and adrenaline making her heart race. Behind them, Hayes and Charlie followed in grim silence. The first canyon was empty, just rocks and shadows. They moved to the second, and Evelyn felt the tension ratcheting higher with each mile. This was it. Whatever happened next would decide everything. The second canyon showed signs of recent use, hoof prints, campfire remains, the smell of cattle on the wind. Colt held up his hand, and they stopped. "They're here," he whispered. Or they were recently. They dismounted, moving on foot, rifles ready. As they rounded a bend, Evelyn saw them. Their cattle, penned in a natural enclosure, guarded by 4 men sitting around a fire. Colt signaled Hayes and Charlie to circle around. Then he stepped into the firelight, his rifle aimed at the nearest guard. "Don't move. You're covered from 3 sides." The guards froze. One started to reach for his gun, but Hayes's voice cut through the darkness. "Do it, and you're dead." Slowly, the rustlers raised their hands. Colt approached, his rifle never wavering. "Where's Fletcher?" he asked. "Don't know what you're talking about," one of them said. "Wrong answer." Colt cocked his rifle. "Let's try again. Where is Richard Fletcher, and how do I prove he hired you?" "You can't prove anything. We're just working for—" The rustler stopped, realizing his mistake. "Working for who?" Evelyn asked, stepping forward despite Colt's warning glance. "Finish that sentence." The rustler looked at his companions, then back at Colt. "Fletcher'll kill us if we talk." "I'll kill you if you don't," Colt said flatly. "Choose." Fear won. The rustlers started talking about Fletcher's operation, about how he'd hired them to steal cattle and sell them to the railroad, about the fires, the intimidation, the whole scheme designed to drive ranchers into Fletcher's association. "Where's the proof?" Evelyn asked. "Where's the evidence that connects Fletcher directly?" "Ledger. Fletcher keeps records of everything, how much he paid us, which ranches we hit, profits from the cattle sales. He's got it hidden at his house in Red Hollow." "How do you know?" "Because I delivered papers to him once, saw it in his study, locked in a safe." The rustler looked desperate now. "That's all I know, I swear. You let us go, we'll leave the territory. You'll never see us again." Colt considered this. "Charlie, tie them up. We'll let the real marshal deal with them." He turned to Evelyn. "We need that ledger." "That means going to Fletcher's house, in town, where he has all the advantages." "I know, but it's the only way to prove this definitively." He reloaded his rifle. "I'm going tonight, before he can move or destroy evidence." "Then we're going together." "Evelyn, don't argue, you'll lose." She checked her borrowed rifle. "Besides, you need someone to watch your back, and someone who can read quickly if we find that ledger." They rode for Red Hollow, leaving Hayes and Charlie to guard the rustlers and cattle. The plan was simple. Get in, find the ledger, get out. If they were caught, they'd probably be killed. Fletcher couldn't afford to let them live with that evidence. The town was quiet when they arrived, most buildings dark. Fletcher's house sat on the edge of the main street, a large, pretentious structure that screamed new money. A single lamp burned in an upstairs window. "He's awake," Colt whispered. Or he left it burning. They circled to the back of the house, finding a window that opened onto what looked like a study. Colt pried it open with his knife, moving silently despite his size. They climbed through, landing in a room lined with books and expensive furniture. The safe sat behind the desk, exactly where the rustler had said. Colt knelt beside it, examining the lock. "Can you open it?" Evelyn whispered. "Maybe. Give me a minute." While Colt worked on the safe, Evelyn kept watch at the door. Her heart hammered so loud she was sure it would wake the entire house. Every creak of settling wood made her jump. Then she heard footsteps. "Someone's coming!" she hissed. Colt abandoned the safe and moved to the window. Too late. The door opened, and Richard Fletcher stood there in his nightshirt, holding a pistol. "I was wondering when you'd show up," he said calmly, "though I expected you to be smarter than breaking into my home." "We know everything," Colt said. "The rustlers talked." "It's over, Fletcher." "Is it?" Fletcher smiled. "You're standing in my house, having broken in illegally. You have no proof of anything, just the word of criminals trying to save themselves. Who do you think people will believe, them or me?" "The ledger in that safe will prove—" "What ledger? I have no idea what you're talking about." Fletcher's gun stayed steady. "When I shoot you both for breaking in, no one will question it. I'll be the victim, defending my home from a violent rancher and his disgraced woman." Evelyn felt cold certainty settle over her. He was right. Fletcher would kill them, claim self-defense, and no one would question it. Everything they'd worked for would die in this room, unless she could change the narrative. "You're right," she said, her voice steady despite her fear. "No one will question you shooting us, but they will question why a man who claims to be innocent has a safe full of evidence in his study." "What are you talking about?" "The deputy, Warren, he's corrupt, but he's not stupid. When we disappear, people will ask questions. The ranchers Colt visited today will wonder. Sarah Mitchell will talk, and eventually someone will search this house and find that safe. There's nothing in there that connects me to anything illegal." "Then open it. Prove it right now." Fletcher hesitated, and in that hesitation, Evelyn saw the truth. The ledger existed, it was damning, and Fletcher couldn't risk opening the safe with witnesses present. "Or don't open it," she continued, "but know that the moment you pull that trigger, you start a clock. The real marshal will come. The ranchers will demand an investigation, and eventually someone will get into that safe and find the truth." "You're bluffing." "Am I? What do you think Colt did all day today? He visited every ranch within 50 miles, told them about you, about the rustlers, the fires, the whole operation. You think they'll just accept that he mysteriously died tonight? You think they won't connect it to you?" Fletcher's gun wavered slightly. Evelyn pressed her advantage. "Your whole plan depended on secrecy, on ranchers being too afraid and isolated to fight back. But Colt changed that today. He built exactly what you feared most, a community willing to stand together." She took a step forward. "You can kill us, but you can't kill the resistance. It's bigger than us now." The room was silent except for breathing. Then a voice called from outside. "Fletcher, we know you're in there." Elizabeth Callahan stood in the street, rifle in hand. Behind her stood Morrison, Henderson, and a dozen other ranchers, the same people Colt had visited that day. They'd followed, unwilling to let him face Fletcher alone. Fletcher's face went white. He was trapped. If he killed Colt and Evelyn now, he'd do it in front of witnesses who'd already turned against him. His carefully constructed empire was crumbling. "It's over," Colt said quietly. "Open the safe. Let's end this." Fletcher stood frozen, weighing his options. Then his shoulders sagged in defeat. He lowered the gun, moved to the safe, and worked the combination. Inside sat a leather ledger, exactly as the rustler had described. Evelyn grabbed it, flipping through pages of meticulous records, payments to rustlers, names of targeted ranchers, profits from stolen cattle, everything they needed to destroy Fletcher completely. "This goes to the real marshal," she said. "Not Warren, the actual territorial marshal who will prosecute you for theft, arson, conspiracy, and attempted murder." Fletcher sank into his chair, suddenly old. "I built this territory. Without my money, half these towns would never have existed." "You didn't build anything," Colt said. "You just stole from people who actually did the work. There's a difference." They left Fletcher sitting in his study and walked outside to face the gathered ranchers. Morrison stepped forward. "We couldn't let you do this alone," he said simply. "Figured you'd need backup." "How did you know to come?" "Charlie sent his son ahead, told us the plan. We came as fast as we could." Morrison looked at the ledger in Evelyn's hands. "That the evidence?" "Everything Fletcher did, written in his own hand." "Good. Then let's make sure it gets to the right people. They rode back to Mercer Ridge as dawn broke over the mountains, exhausted but victorious. The territorial marshal arrived 3 days later, the real one this time, a hard-faced man named Patterson who'd been investigating Fletcher for months. The ledger gave him everything he needed. Fletcher was arrested, his assets frozen, his association dissolved. Deputy Warren disappeared before he could be questioned. The rustlers were tried and sentenced. One by one, Fletcher's web of corruption was dismantled. But the changes went deeper than just Fletcher's arrest. The ranchers who'd stood together that night formed a real association, not one designed to extract money, but one focused on mutual protection and fair business practices. Elizabeth Callahan became its first president, despite being the youngest member. Or maybe because of it, she brought a perspective others lacked. Sarah Mitchell's husband was elected to the territorial legislature, where he pushed for laws protecting small ranchers from predatory business practices. The newspaper, freed from Fletcher's influence, began reporting honestly about corruption and land rights. Red Hollow transformed slowly, painfully, but definitely. The town that had watched Evelyn's humiliation on that platform became a place where character mattered more than connections, where standing up to bullies was celebrated instead of punished. Mercer Ridge prospered. With Fletcher gone, Colt rebuilt the barn, bigger and better than before. The ranch expanded, hired more workers, became known throughout the territory as a place where people were treated fairly and work was valued. And Evelyn found herself at the center of it all, no longer just a housekeeper, but Colt's partner in everything that mattered. She managed the business side while he handled the ranch operations. She negotiated with suppliers while he worked with the cattle. Together, they built something that lasted. It took 3 months after Fletcher's arrest before Colt finally asked the question Evelyn had been waiting to hear. They were standing on the porch at sunset, watching the valley turn gold. The ranch house had been expanded, the land had been improved, and the future looked brighter than either of them had dared hope. "I've been thinking," Colt said carefully, "about us, about what this is." "And what is it?" "Started as employer and employee, became partners. But somewhere along the way, it turned into something else." He looked at her, vulnerable in a way he rarely allowed. "At least for me it did." Evelyn's heart was beating too fast. "For me too." "Yeah?" He smiled and it transformed his face. "That's good, because I've been wanting to ask you something for months now, but the timing was never right. There was always some crisis, some fire to put out. Colt." She touched his hand. "Just ask." He took a breath. Evelyn Hart, will you marry me? Not out of obligation or convenience, but because I can't imagine building any of this without you. Because you're the strongest person I've ever met, and the only one who makes me believe I deserve good things." The proposal was awkward and earnest and perfectly them. No poetry, no pretense, just raw honesty. "Yes," she said, "I'll marry you." He kissed her then, gentle and fierce at once, and Evelyn felt something settle into place. This was what she'd crossed 1,500 miles to find, not safety or security or a man to save her, but a place where her strength mattered, where her choices shaped the world around her, where she could be fully herself without apology. They married a month later in the ranch house, surrounded by the community they'd helped build. Morrison gave her away. Elizabeth and Sarah stood as witnesses. Even Old Man Henderson showed up, pronouncing the whole thing about damn time. Warren Blackwood, unsurprisingly, didn't attend. He'd left the territory shortly after Fletcher's arrest, heading back east with his tail between his legs. The banker's daughter had broken their engagement once Fletcher's crimes came to light. Apparently being connected to a criminal enterprise wasn't good for social standing. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Years passed, marked by seasons and challenges and small victories. The ranch grew. Children came, 3 of them, each stubborn as their parents. Evelyn divided her time between managing the business, raising her family, and working with the territorial government on land reform policies. She never forgot that morning on the platform, never forgot what it felt like to be discarded and alone. But instead of letting that memory define her, she used it as fuel. She made sure other women in the territory had options beyond marriage, helped establish schools and medical clinics, created opportunities for people who'd been told they didn't matter. Colt built too, but differently. He proved that a man could be strong without being cruel, could succeed without crushing others. His ranch became a model for fair labor practices, for treating workers with dignity. Young men came from across the territory to work for him, knowing they'd be paid honestly and taught valuable skills. Together, they transformed not just their land, but their entire corner of Wyoming territory. On quiet evenings, when the work was done and the children were asleep, they'd sit on the porch and watch the sunset over the valley. Sometimes they talked about the early days, the fires, the fights, the fear. Other times they sat in comfortable silence, no words needed. One such evening, 5 years after Fletcher's arrest, Evelyn said, "Do you ever think about how different things could have been? If Blackwood hadn't rejected me, if you hadn't offered me that job?" "Every day," Colt said, "and every day I'm grateful it worked out exactly the way it did." "Even the bad parts?" "Especially the bad parts. They're what made us strong enough to handle everything else." He took her hand. "You know what Henderson told me once? He said the fight never really ends. There'll always be another Fletcher, another challenge, another reason to give up. But we don't. No, we don't." He smiled at her. "Because we built something worth fighting for, not just land or money, but a community. A life. A partnership that means something." Evelyn leaned against his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him. "I used to think being rejected by Blackwood was the worst thing that ever happened to me. And now? Now I think it was the best, because it brought me here, brought me to you, showed me I was strong enough to survive anything." She looked up at him. "I was never the woman nobody wanted, Colt. I was just the woman waiting for something worth wanting." "And did you find it?" "Yeah, I found it." They sat together as darkness fell, watching stars emerge one by one across the Wyoming sky. Behind them, the house they'd built stood solid and warm. Around them, the land they'd protected stretched away in waves. Ahead of them, the future waited, uncertain as always, but theirs to shape. Evelyn Hart Mercer, once a discarded bride, once a desperate woman with 17 cents and no options, had become exactly who she was always meant to be. Not by being rescued or saved, but by choosing to fight. By refusing to accept other people's judgment of her worth. By building a life on her own terms, brick by stubborn brick. And in the end, that was the only victory that mattered. Not defeating Fletcher, not saving the ranch, not even finding love, though all of those things were important. The real victory was discovering that she'd had the strength inside her all along. She just needed the right circumstances to let it show. The frontier had a way of revealing people's true nature. It burned away pretense and politeness, stripped everything down to what actually mattered. Some people discovered they were weaker than they'd thought. Others found reserves of strength they'd never known existed. Evelyn had found both. Weakness that made her human, strength that made her formidable. And in accepting both sides of herself, she'd become someone who could stand beside a man like Colt Mercer as an equal. Someone who could build a life worth living in a place that didn't tolerate weakness or lies. The woman nobody wanted had become the woman everyone needed. The discarded bride had become the foundation of a community. The desperate refugee from Philadelphia had become the heart of Wyoming territory. And as the stars wheeled overhead and the night settled in around them, Evelyn knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. Not because fate or destiny had placed her here, but because she'd chosen it, because she'd fought for it, because she'd refused to let anyone else define what her life could be. That was worth every hardship, every danger, every moment of fear. That was worth everything.